So in the last video, I saw an error where the split curves wasn't giving the expected value. And I believe that's because the parameters weren't in the correct order. So I'm going to go ahead and change this and use what's called a link. I'm going to call it intersection params. And then I'm going to go use the intersect points. And I'm going to cast this to a point 3D. And then I want to process each one of these. And so this is going to give me the point from the selection. And then I want to get the parameter. And so now I'm going to get the closest point and the parameter. And then I have a double value. And I want to make sure that the double value is greater than the curve.start param, and that the double is less than the curve.end param. And then I want to order it by the double value. And then for the double collection, I can convert this, since it's going to be an I enumerable or an ordered I enumerable. And so I want to send that to an array. I thought it did. Oh, so it's just the array. And so now the double collection is now within the correct order, if there is any. And I'm just going to remove this. Whoops. Just so it's out of the nested loop. And I want to convert it to the demo layer before it leaves from the method. And so that should then fix that issue. And I'll go ahead and rebuild and debug this. And with Civil 3D open, I can then double check this, select the polyline, and now it is correct. Not quite sure where my properties went. But if I go to the Home tab, I can see that this is Bridge Pier Demo. And then those are the original layers. I can undo this. and then add some additional objects. Maybe add a 3D polyline. And so I want to make sure my 3D polyline has some elevations to it. And then I want to insert a block or two. And I'll put them on a layer that's more interesting. And then I'll save my test drawing. And then I'll run the demo layers again. And so I have E not implemented yet. And so that's, I'm assuming, going to be for the 3D polyline. So I don't want it to fail on all of them. And so I'm going to put a try catch loop within here. And so that way, if there is an error, it'll only ruin one of them and not all of the cycle. And then I can put it here. And then here I can see that I got it not implemented yet. And then you can look at the stack trace. And it's the intersect with that is not current. If I hover over this, you can go to the RX class and see it's a parcel. I guess since I created the site, it created the whole thing. So I'm going to go ahead and skip that entity. So it looks like I didn't do that. So I can go ahead and add in the reference to it to Civil 3D. And so I can browse. And that's going to be the ACDB managed. And then now it should let me do that, but it looks like I need another one. So that just means that I moved the project and it's in the wrong spot. And I'll just make sure that copy local is set to none for all of them, or no. So now it'll let me do that. And I'll fully qualify this for entity to the AutoCAD version. And then I'll write the message. But I don't really want to create the editor each time I need to write a message. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new class. And then I can add my editor. And then if I need to write a message, I can then use this BIM demo app. .write message and then write the message that I want. So up here I can come up here and say not supported. And then in the write message, instead of adding the new line at each one of the location, I can just add it here and then make sure that it's also added at the end. And then if I want to add more information to like an error message, and then I can do EX stack trace, and then I'll write it to the command line. And then I can debug it again and look for more unsupported or unfinished API work by Autodesk. And so then I can test it again. And then I can look and see what the next error is. Once again, not implemented yet. I can come up here and look at the stack trace. And I can get intersected with, once again. You can look at the object class. And it looks like my problem is I put this in the wrong spot. And then I can see what this issue is. And here's the get split curves. And I imagine it's going to be the feature line. Yep. And so here I can see it split the 3D polyline. It split that, but the feature line wasn't split. So down here, we would then need to account for this. And so I'll go ahead and put a breakpoint here. Oh, and the blocks went to a demo layer as well. I'll also add some Kogo points. Or at least one of them. And so it's on V node, so we should be in a good example there. And so I'll go ahead and copy this point. Then undo everything so I get back to the beginning drawing. And then paste back in the point. So I'll do demo layers again. And since I want to intercept the feature line first, I'll go ahead and add it here. And then do an else if for the curve. So I'll put my breakpoint here. And so this becomes more complicated. And so I'll just add need to fix for now and then hit play. And I can see the Kogo point got put on the demo layer as well. And then it skipped the feature line. And then there's an error message here. So I'll go ahead and see why the parcel isn't being populated correctly. So it looks like it's a site object. So let's try this again. So now it hits this. And then now I don't have an exception anymore for that parcel object. So splitting a feature line is complicated. And that's probably why Civil or Autodesk is too lazy to do it. So you need to collect all the data for the elevation points and the vertices, and then delete the data you don't need on the original feature line, and then create 2 new feature lines. In this case, right? So I have the original, and then I have the area where I put it on the demo layer, and then need to create a new segment over here based on the parameters. So I'm going to go ahead and stop debugging. And I'm going to create a new folder for feature lines. And I'm going to go ahead and add a new class to add the feature line point data to. And so this is going to be the data that I can have. So the first thing I want to do is save the parameter. And that's going to be the parameter along the feature line. I'm going to have a point 3D. And that's also going to be the location of the point. And then I want to have the feature line point type. And I'm just going to call this point type. And this is Civil 3D's definition of a point. And so it's either going to be a PI point, an elevation point, or all points. But for this class, it'll just be PI point or an elevation point. And so I'll also add a feature line and so then I'll have a public static and then I'll have the I'll just call them split points. And then I'll go ahead and return the split feature lines. So I want to collect the feature line data. And so I'm going to add in a class for that, or a method, I should say. And so this is going to get the feature line point data. And so I want to get all of the elevation points. This is the wrong type of point3D collection. So I want to get a method that'll get the elevation data. At each one of the split points, and that way I can have that elevation value where I need to have the start and the end of the information. So I then want to be able to recreate these segments of the feature line. And so in order to do that, I need to flatten the feature line. So I'm going to go ahead and use a temporary feature line. By cloning this feature line. And then I should have a feature line that I can then modify. And so this feature line clone, I want to flatten the point data to 0. And the reason why I want to do that is because I want to get the geometry of the feature line with the curves. And so I'll go ahead and add in another extension method to flatten it. And then it's going to ask, should it delete the elevation points? And in this case, I want it to. And then I can create one for the PI point data. Got no errors, so I'm good there. And then I want to go ahead and clone or get a feature line or a polyline from this value. So then I want to use this as a projected curve for my feature line clone. And I want to get a flat curve from this. And the reason why I want to do this is because sometimes it returns a polyline 2D. And sometimes it returns just a regular polyline. So I want to convert that polyline 2D to a polyline. And so that's going to be a curve extension. And I want to make sure I use the extension. And sometimes you need to convert stuff from 2D to 3D. And so here I'll do and then I can simply return the value here. And so then instead of having to do the conversion everywhere, I can just do a 2.3D. And so this is going to convert the curve to a polyline. If it's a polyline, it's just going to return the polyline. If it's a feature line, it's then going to convert it to a flat curve and get the polyline and then return the polyline. And then if it's a polyline 2D, it's going to go ahead and convert it into a polyline. And then if it's a 3D polyline, it's going to process that and convert it into a flat polyline. And so then I have the flat polyline. And then I need to then split this. So that's going to be the same code as over here. And I'm going to go ahead and change this to use an extension. Then I can copy this. And then I can do new double collection and convert it to an array, so I get rid of the squiggly marks. So instead of duplicating my code, I can then now do and then I can get the split curves from the params, just like I did previously. And then if my split curves are nothing, I can go ahead and return my split feature lines because there's nothing else to process. And then I can go ahead and process the curves. And that was autopilot hallucinating. And this is going to be a DB object. And it's going to be confused, so I'll go ahead and set the DB object equals to the AutoCAD one. And so I'm just going to cast it as a curve instead of a DB object. And so I want to add this split curve. I want to add it to model space. So then I want to create the feature line. And so that's going to be and that's going to be equal to the original feature line. If the site ID is null, then the feature line I'm going to create it. With the no name. and I want to pass it my split curve object ID. And then if it does have a site, I want to pass it in the original Featureline site ID, so it goes on to that site. And then I need to assign the elevations. So I'm going to convert this object ID into the split feature line. So my split params are going to have values. So my starting param for the first one is going to equal to the feature line start param. So the end param is going to be equal to the split params and the first one. But I want to do that down here. And then I want to remove it from the list. So the next one, the next param is going to be the 0 one. And so for the split feature line, so the points to adjust is going to be from the feature line elevation point data, where the point data is greater than or equal to the start parameter and greater than or equal to the end parameter. And so that's going to give me the list of points that are applicable to this segment, presumably. And then I want to go and, for my split curve, I want to assign the feature line point data and pass it the points to adjust. And so I can add that as an extension method. And then if there's any errors, I'm just going to write it to the command line and what the error is. And that should have been split feature line. And then I want to assign all of the existing data to the object. And so now if we've done everything correctly, we should then get the split feature lines once we add it to the collection. And then that we can process it. And so we'll go back to our demolition and we'll come here. And then we'll do split the feature line. With the intersect points. And then we need to check the layers. Yeah, we can just copy this. And we don't need to add it to model space. So we don't process this again. And we don't need to add it to model space. And if it's outside, we don't need to do anything. And so if everything's done correctly, we should then be able to debug this. And then we can run the demo layers command again and see if it splits it. And so it looks like it created the feature lines, created one there. We have the original feature line, which we also needed to delete. So we just have the feature line now. And for the feature line, we can erase it because we no longer need it. And then once we're done, we need to return. So it looks like our issue is here. So there is no split params. So we would need to add a check here. So there's another issue going on here, I think. So we'll try it one more time. Oh, so my start param needs to be updated down here to be the current in param. And so now it's going to go from 0.66 to 2.36. And so I'm getting the item, but there's no more items left. And so that means that I want to get the in param instead. And then if there is one left in there, then I want to get the next split params. bit too much. And so now it should give me the expected results. So I'll go ahead and undo this. And so I have a feature line. I have a feature line and a polyline. And then I have a feature line and a polyline. So what I want to do next is get rid of delete the polyline. After it's been added, after it's been created from the polyline. So we're creating it here. Here's my split curve object ID. And so I'll go ahead and do the demo layers again. I'll select the polyline. So we've created it. And we'll go ahead and delete it. I don't need to cast it to anything. I can just do erase, and then that should get rid of it. And so now I have a feature line, I have a feature line, and a feature line. And then the topo feature line is then put on the demo here, and then the first segment is located here. And so that's how we can change the demo layers to fix the polyline issue and then split a feature line.